Production funding for Virginia Currents is made possible in part by
Alpha Natural Resources. We partner with more than 1,000 community organizations. At Alpha, we fuel progress around the world through the energy of our people.
Coming up on Virginia Currents, how one woman's inheritance of thousands of pictures gives a peek of what life was like in Richmond a century ago.
And what these pictures do is begin to show you that there was a time when we had these distinct communities and yet they still work together in certain ways.
Also, find out how Wounded Wheels helps disabled vets gain freedom to drive in classic style.
We have to start by adding a third door to a Chevelle, something that nowhere else in the world exists.
Plus, from sharks to sea turtles, see what it takes to keep the residents of the Virginia Aquarium happy and healthy. And a driving look at transportation museums across Virginia, plus the inspirational music of Rooted Deep, all coming up on Virginia Currents. Welcome to Virginia Currents. I'm Daphne Maxwell Reed. When cleaning out the homes of her late father and the aunt she now cares for, Kitty Snow stumbled upon thousands of century-old photographic treasures taken by her great-grandfather, Harris Stilson. In the early 1900s, Harris operated a streetcar in Richmond's Jackson Ward and Carver areas and took photos of the everyday and momentous events, places, and people of a bygone era. To help restore, preserve, and make public these inherited photos, negatives, and movies, Kitty formed a partnership with VCU libraries called Richmond in Sight. Some of the movies have evidence of being the oldest lenticular color films in a local or regional cultural institution in the state. Now, we visited Kitty in her home to find out what drives her to spend every so-called free moment trying to track down the stories behind these photos.
Okay, let's see. This is the Stilson-Lynch family pictures. My great-grandfather, Harris Stilson, had 3 children, and his daughter, Anita, had 3 children, and one was my father, Howard Lynch, one was my Aunt Norma, Kathleen, and one was my Aunt Margaret, who is sitting here with us today. My great-grandfather was a streetcar motorman and an avid photographer in Richmond in the early 1900s. He worked on the West Clay Line, which is Jackson, Ward, Carver, Newtown, all the neighborhoods that are Jewish immigrants, African Americans. He never put his camera down. So the pictures that I inherited and that I found were things that he took while on the streetcar and just in life in general. And this is his journal. Here's November 29th, 1918. His son was killed in World War I in France. On that date, he has quoted the telegram that he received: "Deeply regret that it is officially reported that Private Leon H. Stilson died October 7th of wounds received in action." So you'll have something as significant as that, and then the next entry will be that he paid the washerwoman. So there's, in 1907, he advocated integration, and he suggested that diversity made a country stronger, and the things that he was saying, it's one he didn't get strung up, because the things he was saying were just not socially acceptable commentaries. In this book somewhere, it's talking about going to the Lubin and seeing Uncle Tom's Cabin, the movie Uncle Tom's Cabin. I've got the pictures that I have of my great-grandfather's family. His son, his friends were African American. This is 1910. My great-uncle Don, who I adored, and I think his name was Denny Robinson, and I have looked hard trying to find Denny Robinson, but he was a neighbor, and that's a pigeon coop behind them. My great-grandfather raised pigeons, carrier pigeons.
He took photographs of women at Hartshorn College. Sometimes they were pretty serious photographs, and sometimes they're just sort of playing around. So he had a pretty good relationship with the people there, but it humanizes the people of that era to see them behaving like you would expect college students to behave. It's just so often it's just such an intimate look at people doing daily chores that normally you wouldn't pay any attention to. Nobody would normally take photographs of. I think it's surprising to see the kind of work that people did and the way they did it. We have a photograph of digging the footing at 9th and Broad Street, where they're using an old-style steam shovel that's so old it doesn't run on tracks. It runs on round metal wheels.
This is what my father had out in the shed. Makes me sick to think of it. But this is what he had in his shed. But you got to remember, the movies were in my father's garage. But yeah, here's his original camera. This is the actual movie camera. He didn't take that on the streetcar. It was too expensive. It cost him $12.
How to roll the film in. This is the camera lens over here. So you're supposed to do a slow and steady turn.
We have the movies, which we've donated to VCU from 1929 and 1931. We've got his movies, but we also have the movie camera, the price sheet, the instructions, and I have in his journal the notation that says, Miss Day of Gillespie has given me free of charge a moving picture camera and projection in the hopes that I will buy it in the coming year. That was in October of 1928, and he took movies in 1929. She was a pretty savvy salesperson because he did buy that movie camera. And the movies that he took are among the oldest, if not the oldest, in any institution, cultural institution in Virginia. The first presentation I made at the Weinstein JCC, and I heard a man say, I knew a streetcar man named Stilson. He let me drive the streetcar. That man was 93-year-old Morris Goldberg, and he was raised at Hancock and Clay, and he rode on the streetcar with my great-grandfather, and he can show you how you drive a streetcar. Richmond Insight is about that. It's about presentations, it's about sharing, it's about showing relatives of families pictures that they never knew existed. I have a picture, series of pictures of a little toy streetcar. This picture was a miniature that was created by Bo Eubank, who collected the first nickel fare on the first streetcar in Richmond in 1888. But I thought, I've got to find somebody that's related to this man. So it took me a year to do it, but I found Walter Eubank, and he is the grandson of the man, Bo Eubank, that took the first nickel fare. Mr. Eubank said, when I was a little boy, I didn't know my grandfather, but when I was a little boy, I went to a museum, and they had a little streetcar and a picture of my grandfather. So I called the Valentine Museum. They have the streetcar miniature that his grandfather made, and I got them to look in their archives, and they found the picture. So we took them down to see his grandfather's toy streetcar, and we've got pictures of him standing by his grandfather's little miniature streetcar. I will get on the phone and call people and say, you know, I know you think I'm an insane person, but I'm asking you, do you know about this? And people in Richmond are so generous with their time and their information. The stories are amazing. Mr. Barkey has a place down on Broad Street, Barkey's Records. Anyhow, Mr. Barkey and Irving told me about Mama would make us squunch down really little so we could get on the streetcar for free. And he said, and then when they'd come up there, if the streetcar man said, that boy's too big, he has to pay, Mama would step back off and wait for the next streetcar. He said, sometimes it took 2 or 3 streetcars before we'd be able to get on because we didn't have the money to get on the streetcar. So you're talking about somebody that didn't have a nickel. This was the Depression. People had no money.
So people would get on the streetcar and ride over to Forest Hill Park. There's a stone house that was there, but they built an arcade buildings all around it, little wooden arcade stalls and that sort of thing. They also put in a large roller coaster, which at the time they called the Dixie Flyer. And the main purpose was to get people to ride the streetcar to go somewhere, because that's really what the streetcar did, was it allowed you to leave your neighborhood without having to walk for forever.
I've not met anybody that I've interviewed that was white that did not learn to swim in Shields Lake.
I wonder why they stopped
I can tell you why. Integration. When Mr. Goldberg said that they closed it up and said that there was something wrong with it, and it wasn't anything wrong with it. They just didn't want to allow the blacks. We had World War I African American soldiers on parade coming home with the Elks parade in front of them and the people waiting for the parade. They got off at the freight station and came through their neighborhoods on parade when they came home from World War I. There are places that have these pictures, but they're in archives. They're not accessible. The difference between us and a museum, we have them and we want them shared. We want people to be able to see them, readily see them, instead of having to go down and make an appointment to see them in an archive collection.
Can you guesstimate how many photos you have?
Around 3,000 negatives and pictures.
Why is it so important?
When these people die, or they can't tell their stories anymore, the history is gone. So it's a part of the history. It's a part of our social and economic and cultural history. All those things are a part of Richmond's past, but they make us who we are now and who we will be in the future.
Helping preserve the history behind these photos are books, presentations, displays, and a website. Kitty's first book, From a Richmond Streetcar, is available from Amazon, Dietz Press, and local bookstores. To look at some of the pictures and find out more, go to richmondinsight.com. Offering fallen heroes mobility freedom through discarded classic automobiles is the goal of Dan Short, the owner of Phantom Works Auto Restoration and Modification and the founder of Wounded Wheels. This first-of-its-kind nonprofit organization modifies dilapidated classic cars into vehicles that are wheelchair operational by disabled vets. The process entails tailoring a powered wheelchair to the specific needs of a disabled vet, then adapting the chair so it can enter the car and become part of the driver's seat. The end result, the soldier can enter, exit, and drive the car without any assistance. We caught up with Dan, who was labeled a disabled veteran when discharged by the Army in 2005, to find out what drove him to start up Wounded Wheels.
There was a young man in my neighborhood who lost his legs in combat, and I understand he was 19 at the time it happened. I put myself in the position of a young 19, 20-year-old guy coming back from, Afghanistan or Iraq in a wheelchair, and thought through everything that is going to be a challenge for that young man.
And the front door is still just a full door.
Not only do I want that individual to be able to easily get into a vehicle and have his mobility back, I want to give that young man back a sense of self-esteem that, to me, comes as a result of being able to have the freedom that you had, say in this case, prior to, the mishap. A Chevelle, in all reality, is not as practical a vehicle as a minivan for moving in a wheelchair. But ask a 20-year-old guy which they'd rather drive, a minivan or a Chevelle, and I'll be really surprised if anyone doesn't answer the Chevelle. We've actually been in development of this vehicle now in terms of actually bending metal for about a year now. My goal is to, this spring, have our first individual out driving it as a full production configuration vehicle. Right now it runs and drives and you can get in it, but all of our systems aren't final automated yet, and that's still the process we're going through now. The most important thing when dealing with a 40-some-year-old car is the condition of the car. We have to start with a real good donor car, or we have to upgrade that donor car to a standard that it would meet kind of essentially show specifications. Preparing a car like a Chevelle for a wounded hero involves several steps. The first of which is to actually open up the doorway to the car wide enough that we can get a wheelchair into and out of it. And so that means we have to start by adding a third door to a Chevelle, something that nowhere else in the world exists, a three-door Chevelle other than in this shop. Once the third door is installed and added, then we go about creating what we call the table assembly. The table is a platform that takes the wheelchair essentially from the back seat area of the car and transitions it down and under the steering wheel. And what this does, of course, is puts the driver in a wheelchair in a position to where he can comfortably drive a Chevelle. In order to then get the wheelchair up into that back seat so that we can table them down into the driving area, we have to create a ramp system that is extremely unique to a Chevelle. We can't use an existing minivan ramp or any ramp that's ever been designed because of the physical and size constraints of the Chevelle. When we started this program, we assumed we had tolerances of 1 inch or so to deal with. We are now to the point where if we have a 1/4 inch of space to do something, we consider that a big area to work in. So we're down to a precision much tighter than I ever would have expected. We've had no assistance in the engineering of this vehicle. It's been an in-house effort, a lot of sleepless nights with a pencil and a piece of paper. I couldn't be more proud of my team for helping out with this car and getting it built. The motto of our program is restoring heroes in hot rods. I look at these guys and gals, they're heroes. There's nothing less than that. I believe God gives us talents, and we're expected to use those talents for the betterment of man. And in my case, I couldn't think of anything better than to take a very severe hobby and passion for building old cars and turn that into something that I could do for soldiers, specifically those that have had severe trauma. Phantom Works, which actually restores the cars and is doing all the engineering, and Wounded Wheels, you put them together, and I mean, they are my life. It is every penny I own, it is every asset I've ever had, all rolled into, well, into this building and what we're doing with these cars.
An international reality TV show on Discovery's Velocity channel will track the progress of Wounded Wheels and the heartfelt stories of fallen heroes gaining mobility freedom through these classic dream cars. For more information about the show and Wounded Wheels, visit woundedwheels.org. Right outside the hustle and bustle of the Virginia Beach Resort area lies a quiet and fascinating underwater world of aquatic creatures. The Virginia Aquarium and Marine Science Center houses 700,000 gallons of aquariums, live habitats, and over 300 interactive exhibits. With sand tiger sharks, harbor seals, loggerhead sea turtles, cow-nosed rays, and countless mesmerizing fish, the Virginia Aquarium captivates visitors of all ages. To dip into what goes into keeping the aquarium's residents happy and healthy, we went behind the scenes with the aquarium's Sea Savvy staff.
Ooh, Mommy, look! Look, underwater! Guys, those colors?
Here at the Virginia Aquarium, it takes a whole dedicated team of individuals to keep our animals happy and healthy. We have approximately 12,000 animals here. With 2 buildings and a half-mile nature trail, people don't realize how large our exhibits actually are. And people don't realize how engaging and educational our exhibits are.
At the Virginia Aquarium, as an aquarist, it takes a highly trained staff and a lot of dedication and also a lot of teamwork to keep all the animals healthy. We try to encourage natural behaviors in our animals by replicating their exhibit to look like their natural habitat. Replicating their natural habitat educates the visitors on how you would find these animals in the wild, but it also helps you appreciate the entire ecosystem they're found in. To maintain the aquatics exhibits, it takes a lot of dedication and a really in-depth knowledge of the species you're taking care of, and also the equipment that supports each individual exhibit or holding system. Some of the parameters that we regularly monitor for our water quality include pH, alkalinity, salinity, ammonia, nitrate, nitrite. For some of the other systems, we may look, especially like coral systems, we may look at things like strontium and phosphate levels, dissolved calcium. We try to get that water as close to what they would find in the wild as possible. Before we open the facility to the public, we go ahead and do a walkthrough of all the exhibits and holding systems. We check animal health, equipment functions such as the pumps and heat exchangers, things like that. We'll also look at the exhibit appearance, if any of the decor has become dislodged, and we'll make sure to fix all that as best we can before we open. Each day, the aquarium can go through between 200 and 400 pounds of food. Our food is supplied by a restaurant supplier, so it's restaurant quality as you would eat as well. We get squid, we'll get different kinds of fresh fish, including Spanish mackerel and croaker. We also get bluefish, we get butterfish, capelin, smelt, oysters, clams, everything. When we have divers in the tank, the certain precautions necessary vary from tank to tank. For example, in Red Sea, the divers don't wear fins, and that's because there's so many animals that are going to be more likely to approach the divers. We don't want to accidentally kick one of them. For Norfolk Canyon, the divers have little barriers, which they can use to put between them and any of the animals that they feel might be getting a little too close. Usually a visual barrier is enough, so as long as they see it, then they will stay away from you.
At the Virginia Aquarium, we have a great volunteer workforce. We love our volunteers.
He's having a tough time today.
We have 1,390 hours of volunteers a year, which equates to 53 full-time employees. That saves our institution over $1 million a year in saved wages.
Does anybody know what color their blood is? Yes. Very good.
Volunteers do anything from a docent, where they share educational information with our guests. They volunteer and do stranding programs at our stranding center, where they may walk the beach and rescue turtles or seals. They can do anything along our trail, our garden area. We have a whole host of programs for our volunteers.
The Virginia Aquarium and Marine Science Center is a fantastic place to come away with a greater appreciation of the aquatic habitats and the animals that live there. We hope after visiting the Virginia Aquarium and Marine Science Center that visitors will take away a greater appreciation of aquatic habitats, and some of which our local economy is very dependent on, and hope will want to conserve those habitats.
We're here about education. We want people to have fun and be entertained, but our real mission is about conserving the environment and the marine life that lives within that environment. So when you come to our facility, you're going to see a lot of the animals that live in there, but you're also going to get an educational message that talks about conservation of our animals.
That is awesome. Look at it. Look at it. I want to go in there, please. You can go in that hole.
In addition to the aquarium's employees, each month there are over 800 dedicated volunteers aged 11 through 93 who offer their time and enthusiasm. To find out more about the conservation and rescue efforts, boat trips, and many other facets of the aquarium, visit virginiaaquarium.com. There's no doubt Virginia is for lovers, lovers of many experiences like music, art, history, and transportation museums. The U.S. Army Transportation Museum is the only museum dedicated to depicting the history of the Army transportation. From horse-drawn wagons to all-terrain armored vehicles, the story is one of honor and integrity on the move. Located at Fort Eustis, the exhibit includes models, dioramas, and videos. Another great museum that's both kitsch and niche is the Roaring Twenties Antique Car Museum. Located in the quaint town of Madison, the museum boasts 32 vintage cars, along with stationary engines and old farm tools. The museum rounds out its historical ambiance with pieces of period advertising and a myriad of relics. And for the sea lovers, check out the Nauticus, a maritime science museum in Norfolk. It celebrates the economic, naval, and natural power of the sea, with hands-on exhibits, theaters, films, Shark Touch, and is home to the Battleship Wisconsin. To find out more about museums or other Virginia experiences, visit virginia.org. Today's musical spotlight shines on Rooted Deep. Established in 2011 by married couple Jeff and Leah Ryback, this Christian contemporary band from Virginia Beach has a unique sound that crosses generational and cultural boundaries with positive and inspiring messages. Jeff started out as a hard rock singer and guitarist in upstate New York, and Leah grew up in Southeast Virginia, expressing her musical talents in church choirs and special groups. Here now is a sample of their music. Thanks for watching. Tune in next time for more Virginia Currents. I'm Daphne Maxwell Reid.
Production funding for Virginia Currents is made possible in part by
Alpha Natural Resources. We partner with more than 1,000 community organizations. At Alpha, we fuel progress around the world through the energy of our people.